Hello, and welcome to another podcast from Care at Scale. My name is Greg Reiners, and I have the pleasure of welcoming my guest today, Kerri Husman. She is the founder of Vitality Psychiatry that's located in East Wind Healing Center. And in this episode, we will have the opportunity to walk through Kerri's story. So with that, welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Each time I do this, I'm elated to see how the story will go and how it unfolds uniquely for each of the people that I have a conversation with. And I believe this will be one of those episodes. So let's get right into it. You have what I would consider a story that stems multiple different phases through your life. And it really started uniquely and originally when you were much younger, and why you started into the field that you are now. And I would love for you to start and explain that to our audience because I think they will enjoy it.
Well, thank you for that, Greg. So it does go quite a ways back. So by seventh grade, I was subscribing to Psychology Today and already thinking I wanted to work on brains. I was very fascinated by this because of a cousin with schizophrenia and seeing those struggles and how they affected the entire family. And also other health events and issues within the family that extended family that I was aware of. But part of the draw was my own experiences. So when I was a bit younger than that, a few years younger, late elementary, I'd had an experience where I was taking a medicine for asthma, a medicine that they would always check blood levels for now. I now know my genetic SNPs to realize why I didn't metabolize that medicine well now. None of that was tested back then in the late 70s. And I had an experience for what felt like the entire summer. It was several weeks of another couple showing up in my world, coming down the hallway from my parents' bedroom, demanding that they were my real parents. And they looked similar to the couple in the Grant Wood painting, not the same attire. I could still describe that attire and their insistence that they were my parents. And I became increasingly agitated, frustrated, upset along these because I was toxic on this medicine. Nobody knew. Eventually, my own parents, because I hadn't told them any of this, of course, my mom found out decades later about this. And finally, they called the allergist and said, hey, something's wrong here. She's not right. Stop the medicine. Within 48 hours, those people were gone, literally never to return. When I learned core shamanism and learned how to do Psychopomp to assist the dead, I actually went back to check to see if they were still there. They had moved on. And so that experience, I didn't tell a soul about it because I was aware of my cousin with schizophrenia. What does this mean? But it has been, really anchored in a desire to help children. And this is part of why I became a child psychiatrist, was because kids are so much more aware of the other side. The veil is more thin. They have experiences, seeing something out of the corner of their eye, their imaginary friends. This imagined world there's something to it. And if you can assist a child and their family to understand this child is okay, giving reassurance and support rather than what's wrong with you, stop doing that, it can be really helpful to assist them moving on. Granted, some children can have true psychosis. I'm not saying that doesn't happen and isn't possible, but it's certainly not very common. And so I'm glad that those experiences shaped even that was terrible. I mean, it really affected me for a long time. But I'm really glad I had the experience because it helped me understand something that most child psychiatrists have never experienced before. When I was much older and I went, this would be probably 20 years later, early 20s, and I wore the virtual reality headsets that they had for the Risperdal manufacturers had at the APA conference. And it replicated and so they had a schizophrenic graphic designer help build the product so that practitioners could feel and sense and experience what it's like to try to go get your prescription refilled. So the whole VR was set up as a pharmacy with aisles of various over-the-counter products, and between you and what felt like eternity to get to that counter to be able to request the prescription, because back then you had to go to the counter and ask for the refill of the Risperdal, ideally, I suppose, in that particular situation, and then wait in the pharmacy for a number of minutes, and then your number and name be called to pick it up. And it was really unsettling to experience that, but it was done so well, really showing just how much of a struggle that can be. Yeah. So it helped me. It helped kind of build do I treat tons of schizophrenia now? That's not where I really specialize. I certainly see some, and I refer out when necessary if someone is needing more support than I can provide for that particular diagnosis. But it really helps when people are starting to have those experiences to be able to talk about them and to do some normalizing to help patients feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. What's going on with me? What can we do to help this? Rather than being too afraid to speak.
And you had quite a bit of schooling through that process. I don't mean being schooled. I mean, you went to school.
Yes.
And knowing that you had lived experiences that others hadn't and going into a specialty that now you could help others because of that. When you went to college and higher education, where did all that come together? Because I'm sure your professors and others, I don't want to say they questioned you, but they do. There must have been a backstory to when you were being taught that, well, I kind of have had experiences, and which is why I'm here to get my education.
I don't know if I ever talked about that in undergrad. I did major in psychobiology intentionally because I was still really interested in working with the brain, working with the mind. It was a fantastic education. Got to do so many unique things, working with sleep and dreams, working with brain mapping, working with, stereotactic surgeries on rat brains to show how different things can influence when nuclei are damaged, what happens. I mean, again, I'm not saying that animal cruelty is a great thing at all, but this is what was done back then to help people understand how things work. But I really don't think I brought that up, because it was more about learning abnormal psychology, learning structural issues, learning how the psyche responds to stress and trauma. And it was really more based on that than it was about your lived experience.
Well, it's probably different today now than it was then, because
I'm sure it is.
you would have a great opportunity to have a real conversation with a professor that at some point you probably would have had a good professor that would have said, well, why are you here? And you would have had that profound experience. Well, then if it didn't happen there, at some point, as you carried it through your education and started practicing in the field, it would have to have come full circle, because now you're practicing to treat others. And
Absolutely.
how have you been able to draw on that throughout your years of treatment?
So, especially when taking care of kids over the years, and I see far fewer children now than I did in my earlier career, but when kids would have really difficult, stressful times, and they could have a variety of diagnoses, whether it be OCD, ADHD, behavioral disorders of various names, depression, that they would have experiences of seeing or hearing things that aren't real and mind playing tricks on them, seeing things out of the corner of their eye. Sometimes it would be after someone died. Like let's say grandpa died and the lights were flickering. Grandpa died and I saw this shadow in the corner. Well, it was dark. The shadow was a shadow. It's dark. Does that mean it's bad? And so, but knowing that it's grandpa and I'm pretty sure it's okay. And so helping kids kind of work through that without planting my own opinions or values, but more about reassurance and support and helping them to be empowered rather than fearful when they have those experiences. That goes a long ways. And I have conversations with the parents as well, because everyone has their own religion, faith, or lack thereof, and they all have their own morality and their own values, and how the spirit world, for example, fits in to someone's constructs of ordinary reality, their life, and their family does vary quite widely. And so you're always navigating that with curiosity and with compassion.
Then we moved further in your career, and there is a gap in there that I haven't asked you about. You progressed into other types of education and understanding of what's happened with psychiatric treatments. You started a multidisciplinary practice with many others that are there because of understanding how no two people are the same. You have a building with many different others that can also treat. And kind of go down that list a little bit because I think that's very special.
So I was not the founder. So Eastwind Healing Center was founded by Michael Santangelo and Candida Maurer in 1993.
Yeah.
And they're both psychologists. Michael had a naturopath degree. Both of them, they had a massage school. They had both multiple energy modality trainings. So they really brought a lot to the table. And they formed Eastwind Healing Center so that there would be a place where people could get mind, body, spirit type services and, of course, mental health services. And so I came to much later in the game. Michael died in 2018, and I came to this facility at the very end of 2018, right after he died, right when Candida was trying to help figure everything out after his passing. And then in the beginning of 2022, I became one of the owners, and Candida retired. Now, what's really interesting about Candida is she's had a long interest in psychedelic psychotherapy, and at that time was training with CIIS in California, which is a preeminent school for working with MDMA. She was learning how to work with MDMA and psilocybin out there, and yet there's nothing legal and available yet at that point, right? And so when she retired from here, she started overseeing the psychedelic administration at the University of Iowa, 2 miles down the road, and doing the psychotherapy to hold space for the psychedelic research they're doing on ketamine versus psilocybin for alcoholism. And so she worked in there for several years, and she just retired at the beginning of this year from that job. So she's been a mentor and friend all this time and really set the stage for Eastwind to be what it is. I mean, granted, we give tons of credit to Michael because this was really Michael's vision. Candida shared that vision. And what we have now is we have over 90 services here at Eastwind Healing Center. And that ranges from a variety of massage techniques, acupuncture techniques, energy healing such as Reiki, healing touch, craniosacral, reflexology. We have spiritual healing such as core shamanism, which is something that I do. We have psychotherapy, psychology, psychiatry. We have a functional dietitian. We have a functional medicine doc. We have a lab. We have a supplement store. We have a healing room that offers several services oftentimes used when someone's detoxing, they're trying to get their mycotoxins levels down, or they're going through other types of healing situations where they need some extra support. And so there's a sauna and a biomat and red light therapy and foot baths for helping to stimulate body's own ability to release toxins. Surprise, that the water changing color does not mean toxins are in the water or heavy metals are in the water. It's actually helping to jumpstart your own system for releasing. So those are the things that we have here at Eastwind. And so I'm not responsible for all of them because there's a wide range of independent practitioners here. Everyone here is licensed in something and they're renting space. But there's this shared vision that is just so beautiful. We have different therapists essentially offering different types of treatments. And no one's really the same. It's not like we have cookie cutters of everyone offering the same style or structure of therapy. So it's so great to be able to refer amongst the providers here.
Well, that's the part that I wanted to very much make a point of because trust and understanding of a clinician is more challenging. You would think it would be easier these days because there's so much information available.
Mm-hmm.
But with all different techniques, you don't necessarily understand how they practice it until you have that trust element. And having a facility where people are literally down the hallway or next door to you changes that whole experience because as the individual comes in and you're treating them for what you think you need to be doing, I'm sure there's always an aha moment. There's probably some other things that are in the space that could benefit you as well. And it is about getting the patients well.
Yeah. And we will do educational sessions with each other. You know, if I want to experience, so someone's learning a new technique, it's like, I would love to be a guinea pig. You know, I would love for you to do a session with me so I have a better understanding of what that is. And then they'll do something with me, one of the modalities that I offer, to be able to experience what it's like as a client. It's not, you know, taking on patient care, but these educational sessions can be really valuable to understand what people are doing, or especially if they're trying to learn something new. So we help each other out that way.
The word that comes to my mind is evidence-based, right? So when you're evaluating, when you're participating, especially at the clinician level, all of a sudden the evidence becomes so significant
Hmm.
as document what's happening. And I think that's so key. Yeah. As people want to say, well, how do you do that? How does that happen? And you immediately turn to the documentation and evidence to help you through that process.
Right. And there are some therapies that have extensive studies, right? That, I mean, even hundreds of studies. There are some therapy modalities that are based in the frameworks of several therapies, but you've put them together in a new way, tied a bow around it, and it may be called a new method. And then that new method needs to be studied. And so sometimes those new methods, those evidence emerging techniques we also have here that are based in the framework that, was the language for insurance and it's the language for outcome that's expected, but it's put together in a way that really oftentimes results in rapid transition, rapid change, lasting change, and really patients being able to walk out the door feeling better today.
Well, as you walk through another part of your life that we touched on in our last conversation, there was a traumatic event with your stepmother and father-in-law and forced you into kind of taking on a new, I would say treatment, but form of treatment that I was intrigued to listen to as you explained it. So although certainly grief and other challenges around the scenario, you stepped into a void that hadn't really experienced.
That's true. And so what happened was I was learning functional medicine because of some of my own health problems, became very interested in it, and not just for how it can help with mental health, but for all the, you know, autoimmune conditions, inflammation, all the things. And I was learning functional medicine as my father-in-law was diagnosed with glioblastoma. And when glioblastoma is diagnosed, they do genetics on the tumors and pretty much can give you, you're going to have this many months. Depending on if more tumors emerge in just the wrong places, it might hasten one's death, but you're going to have so many months. And so we did all the things with functional medicine. I mean, we had hyperbaric oxygen. We pulled a lot of bells and whistles to really help improve and maintain his quality of life, trying to slow down tumor growth and trying to help maintain the quality of life. And my father-in-law, I mean, would be happy for me to say that he was a stubborn guy. Okay. And, but he also had the luxury of one of the tumors being in just the right location that he really didn't have he had this sense that he was going to get better, that this wasn't going to take him out. And probably it was because of where one of the tumors was located, to be honest. But it really did help because he still wanted to keep working during these last 12, 14 months of his life. He wanted to keep working. And that's okay. I think it was 16 months that from diagnosis to death. And so we did all the things. He followed, and I have the gift of foresight, and I could see that this was going to not get him across the finish line. He was going to need more support than what I could provide with functional medicine interventions. My husband was training as a functional medicine health coach to help his mom, literally. And, diet, lifestyle, everything changing, right? Overnight, yet he was still working as an engineer part-time, increasingly more part-time. And so I realized we're going to need to do more to be able to help suffering, to get him ready for dying, I know that sounds strange, but there are some things energetically and spiritually that can really help one in that process. And so I started learning healing touch. Now, the reason I started learning healing touch is because during all this, I had a reactivation of mono and I couldn't breathe for 3 weeks. I was absolutely miserable. And a friend of mine who's an anesthesiologist, who's functional medicine trained, pain doc, said, you need to meet Laura and Maggie. And Laura and Maggie are now both deceased, but they were they were healing touch nurses who've published extensively in healing touch at the University of Iowa. And I know, again, that sounds really strange, but there have been more studies out of the University of Iowa in healing touch than most of the rest of the world. And in the Department of Nursing. And so I call Laura, and Laura answers with, I've been expecting your call. I'm like, okay. And she then proceeds to have me put my fingertips on various marma points and to tell her when the energy shifts. Now, I've never heard of marma points at this point. Right, this is a whole Indian system. It's different from the meridian system where we know of the 360 meridian points that follow throughout the body on these pathways called the meridians. It's the premovascular system, but the marma system is a whole different system, different points that come to the surface to meet you. And so while a meridian point is only 1 millimeter wide, a marma point comes to the surface. So if you're off, it'll work with you, which is very vastly different. But anyway, so I don't know really what I'm doing. I'm following this woman I've never met on the phone, telling me where to put my fingertips to shift the energy. And I've never done anything to do with shifting energy before. Like, okay, I'll just follow. I got nothing to lose here. I can't breathe. Okay. I'm miserable sitting on my front porch. And as I'm moving the points, I do feel like, I guess maybe there's something that shifted there. I'm just trying to follow along. I kind of felt like I was making it up. After probably 6, 8 of these points, she says, now, Kerri, can you tell me how your breathing is now? I'm breathing fine. Like there's no problem at all. The chest tightness, the wheeze, it's gone, completely gone. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am trained in hypnosis. This was not hypnosis that she was doing, as far as I could tell, some weird kind I'd never heard of before, if it was, but it was gone. And I'm immediately thinking, oh, well, it's going to be back in the morning. This can't last. But she said, well, come in to meet us tomorrow and we'll do a session on you just to make sure it holds. The next morning, I'm totally fine still, gone. But I'm thinking immediately, I got to learn this. Right. And I'm thinking, connect the dots. I've got to be able to help. By this point, my stepmom's cancer has recurred and her sacrum is completely destroyed by uterine cancer that has invaded it. And, I'm thinking I've got 2 people who could really use whatever this is like, because this has eased my suffering immediately. So I go have my session with them and they talk the entire time, telling me what they're doing as they're doing it. These 2 nurses working on me, one at my head, one over my body. And it was incredible. So each time I would go visit them, there was an urgency, because I knew this from the day I walked in. I'm not going to have very long with them. They were both gone within a year. And it was incredible, because every time it was like a stack of papers. Kerri, you need to learn this. And then it'd be something else. Kerri, you need to learn this. And just so incredibly grateful for those experiences. But learning healing touch was life-changing for me. And after that experience in childhood of having this couple that was pretty awful to deal with, healing touch, higher level healing touch, you're working with compassionate beings. They may be angels, they may be light beings, they may be compassionate, evolved, helping spirits that have come down to assist you. Again, different people's belief systems, values might call them different things. And so the higher level work, you're working with them directly. And when I took my level 3 training the first time, we took pictures of the helping spirits working with us, and they're on the camera from the phone. You can see the arms of these helping spirits coming in. You can see light coming in from the walls that have no windows. And it was all caught on camera by our instructor. And she still has it on her Facebook page. Pretty impressive. Yep. It's in the archives. But I had a colleague there who assisted me when we started working with the helping spirits to be able, she put her hand on my shoulder. She sees everything. And I see some things, but I could see everything. And all of these wonderful beings, angelic beings with wings, some without wings, but all of them helping. And I saw, and I'm going to get emotional here, all my dogs from my whole life were there to help. And so I got really emotional. And she said, well, just ask them to open their wings so the air flows, because I felt kind of claustrophobic. And immediately the air flowed and I was fine. And then I could do the work. And I'll never forget that. Beautiful. So learning healing touch and learning from Laura and Maggie, and then recognizing this lifelong desire to learn shamanism. I wanted to, I have indigenous heritage, and I was interested in learning shamanism, getting books from the library as a little kid. And when I was about 8 or 9, my mom said, no, you can't do that. You don't belong to a tribe. That's not how it works, Kerri. And here there's a place, the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, learning core shamanism, where you're not appropriating, but distilled down the techniques that are about the same as all of our ancestors, yours, mine, everyone else's, did around the globe and throughout time, without taking specific cultural nuance that is unique to that indigenous people, so you're not appropriating. Very important. If the foundation was appropriating, I would have no part of it, right? And Laura and Maggie had some resistance to me learning this, because they had dealings with people who would use that word to describe themselves, who were working primarily with middle world spirits. And middle world spirits have an agenda. They may align, their agenda may align with yours, and they may not. they may be protecting the land or the sacred burial ground or the sacred hunting ground or the property that, 5 generations ago, this was my family farm and they're still there. And when you have that kind of, spirit that's helping you, if you're not aligned, things could go south. And so they were concerned about me doing that type of work. So when I started, I learned very quickly that we're working with compassionate, evolved, helping spirits to very similarly to with healing touch, but the strategies are different, the protocols are different, and the outcomes are also different because one's working with energy, the other one's working with the soul or spirit itself. Now, both of these things are really not psychiatry, right? They are separate. And so I've had good mentorship on how to keep those entirely separate practices. And I have them both now here. I brought my healing practice here, and then a few years later, I brought my psychiatric practice here. So I could all be in the same, hour by hour. I go back and forth between the two, the LLC and the S Corp, and the different portals and everything else. Different malpractice, different general liability. All these things are duplicated and separate, and people see me in one or the other. So it is unusual. I will give you that. And people sometimes when they call me, they're like, "I'm not sure what I need from you." Right? So we have a conversation. Sometimes that conversation takes a while. It's okay because I have people in the other realm that I can refer to. So if someone needs me for psychiatric care, but they want shamanic help too, I've got people I can refer to that I know, that I trust. And if I'm doing shamanic help or healing touch or coaching for something with energy psychology, and they're working with their own psychiatrist, someone separate for their own therapy, because that's not therapy. So keeping that language very clean, very open, very on the table, right? So people are informed and can make the best decision for what they need.
You just described in what was profound on so many levels, because the part that I wanted you to finish the story with, which unfortunately they did pass, but your stepmother, your father-in-law waited for you to complete your treatment, your education, be able to treat. And just explain that a little bit.
I definitely can. So when I was learning core shamanism, I had an intention to I had to take a series of classes. And as they were both getting closer to the end of their lives, there was a class called Shamanism, Dying and Beyond. And this was before the pandemic. This is before we had any virtual options for learning Psychopomp. And so I was traveling, across both, most of these classes are on the coasts or in Canada, and I'm having to, fly there, fly here to get these on the weekends in between working in my psychiatric practice. And they were both getting closer to the end of their time here. And I had, there were 3 weeks basically till I could take that class. And I said, please, you've got to wait. And not that I'm trying to, obviously if it's your time to go, you got to go. But I know that there are things that I'm going to learn in that class. I've learned enough to know that there are things that I don't understand that I need to learn to be able to help you and the rest of the family with your passing. And had the workshop, came back immediately because I'd gotten very used to immediately bringing back what I'd learned to assist, right? And both of them died within 3 weeks of that course. And what was beautiful is my father-in-law, his father, they were able to work through in those sessions we had before he passed relationship issues, so he wasn't fearful of being able to reunite with him successfully and letting go of so many things from this life, even though he wanted to stay. And with my stepmom, it was a whole different experience. I go up there, describing everything, and I showed my dad how to do a pain siphon. Now, I thought I'd received how to sense some of these things from my mom. My mom's nickname was KGB when I was growing up, and because she knew everything we did before we did it, and she had a long history of knowing someone in the family was hurt or injured since childhood, but she wouldn't know who it was. And then as she got older, she would know who it was. And so I have to not think or talk about certain events in my life, or she'll call me to make sure I'm okay. So I don't want to put her through that, right? So I've grown up with that, just thinking, oh, this must have come from mom. And I was showing my dad how to do this pain siphon. So he puts his hand underneath my stepmom's sacrum, which is degraded from the cancer. And then he holds my hand, and then I scooch over. So my hand, his hand, we're all going downhill, right? So this pain siphon is a pain gravity drain, basically. And so my hand is the lowest point over here, and it's dripping out the pain, essentially. That's what it feels like. It's just dripping out. And so he's in between, and it's moving, right? And the more people on the chain, it can pull even more of that physical pain or discomfort out. So it's helping to restore flow, because when there's pain, typically the energy system of the body. I mean, obviously you can measure this with an EKG and EEG. We've got special cameras that can show the light that we emit. I mean, it's not like this is totally made up. It sounds weird, but here we are. And so he's sitting there in between, and he looks at me with these giant saucer eyes, and he's like, am I supposed to be able to feel this? And I look at him with giant saucer eyes, and like, maybe? He's like, I feel it. I feel it. Okay. And so I'm like, that's great. So you'll know that it's working when you do it when I'm not here. That's wonderful. But yeah, I was about as shocked as he was. And then after she passed, and this some time had passed, and well, actually, take that back. I'm driving home that day, and I see a certain bird multiple times, same bird. By the time I got to it ended up being over 40 times. But by the time it got into the teens, I call and I said, you need to take a picture, print off a picture of this bird, put it up, because this bird, I think, is going to be assisting her on her passage. And that is how it ended up. So for real, it was just beautiful experience to be able to have that show up for them. And I'll leave it at that. But, after she'd passed, one day he calls me and he says, I think there's somebody in the house, there's a spirit in the house. It's not a human. There's something going through the walls. Now my husband can sense this stuff too. So, and I mean, again, he never knew this until we got together, but he's like, there's something going through the walls. I don't know what it is. What should I do? And I said, and this just pops out of my mouth. I said, Dad, I think she just sent the angels back to check on you, make sure you're okay. So I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I said those words, but that's what came out. Time passes, maybe a couple weeks. He opens up a drawer and there's a letter from his wife that she hid in the drawer. And it said, Ronnie, I'm going to be sending the angels to come back and check on you. So it helped reinforce that she's okay, that he's going to be okay. Yeah. So that stuff is priceless. It's not mental health, but tell me it's not helping one's mental health, right?
It's love. It's exactly what it sounds like, which is they're caring and providing reassurance that when you're providing therapy and other things on the other side, this is what you're also trying to accomplish, which was you're feeling safe in that sense of it's all going to be okay. So, wow, that's a beautiful story, Kerri. So precious that you could facilitate it. And more importantly, when they're your family, it's one thing, but then also to be able to help others who will be participating in these very challenging times, right? So
absolutely. But it is really such an honor, so humbling to be able to hold space for those processes for people and prepare them, and just not coming into death with that fear. We're so used to being fearful coming into death. And I mean, literally tomorrow I teach Shamanism, Dying and Beyond this weekend, and as a faculty member. And I'm going to get to bear witness to 4 more people learning how to assist the departing and the departed. And also, this course really helps the individual who's taking the course shore up their relationship with their own death. It's priceless.
We haven't even gotten into what I thought we were going to talk about, which was psychedelics and how there is I would call initiative, but it's certainly very much a topic in the country these days between the way they're administered, the type that they're administered, the research that's going into it right now based on newfound ability to prescribe and or to participate. So just briefly, if you could, because we'll have to do this in another podcast, because this is a lot more than just a few seconds conversation, but I want you to have the opportunity to talk to not only what you're doing there in Iowa, but also in Colorado, and how you're using this medium to help.
Thank you for that, Greg. And it is very different. What I can tell you is that all these other experiences and trainings help me to hold space for the evolution that occurs during ketamine or Spravato or breath work, or in Colorado, psilocybin. So I really enjoy working with these meds because they are so vastly different from the traditional medications we prescribe that are suppressing emotions, right? I can't laugh, can't cry, can't, feel anything with regard to intimacy, people just being, suppressed. So they're not suicidal, so they can get up and go to work, right? And And while that can save someone's life, and I'm not discounting the importance of meds when they're prescribed when necessary, what's very different about the use of ketamine and Spravato, which are technically not psychedelic, but they're dissociative anesthetics that have a capacity that is very similar to psychedelics with regard to the outcome, even though it's vastly different mechanism of action, different pathways, different neurotransmitters, different everything. The outcome is shifting one's awareness, being able to see things from a different viewpoint or perspective, gaining insight. It's multidimensional, and that's the shared capacity of these meds, is that being able to look at something from multiple different viewpoints and perspectives almost simultaneously and seeing what really matters, seeing yourself possibly on a new pathway. Another shared capacity is this new fallen snow description, where we drive in the same ruts back and forth every day, right? And when there's new fallen snow, it's like you have to kind of make your own path. And that means the ruts don't matter so much anymore. You can move beyond those ruts and try a new path. And for many people, after they do this work, their lives change tremendously. So for some, it's, a new living situation, marriage or divorce, a change in occupation. It can be pretty huge like that. But from a depression standpoint, not being constantly suicidal for 35 years, with ketamine, suicidality can resolve in 20 minutes to 2 hours. And that's why it's used sometimes in emergency rooms. It's also used in agitation and other situations, but sometimes it is used for acute suicidal ideation, especially if there's no beds available because of bed crunches and shortages, was a whole other problem, as we know. But a series of ketamine or Spravato followed by increasingly less frequent boosters over time can completely change someone's life who has struggled with severe depression, maybe have had ECT, TMS, hospitalizations, partial hospital stays, multiple med trials and the side effects with those meds, and oftentimes can get by with less medication, not all those other interventions, and really have hope again and know that even if I got bad, I know that this treatment works and it will work again. It doesn't seem to quit working. It's not like lithium. After you've given it 2 or 3 times and someone stopped it, it kind of quits working. These work again. So that's what I offer in Iowa. In Colorado, I have a natural medicine license as a clinical facilitator. So right now, the natural medicine that's available is psilocybin. And I'm really happy to be able to hone my skills, practice my skills there, because the 2 synthetic psilocins are going to FDA this quarter for approval. And with their double fast tracking as it is, it's possible that they will be approved in months. Now, it would take me 3 minutes to have my room set up for that, because I designed my room for that purpose, to be able to offer that here in Iowa when it is available, when it is legal. And I'm really excited for that, because it's a much bigger experience than, ketamine and Spravato. You've got an experience that's lasting 45 minutes, 90 minutes. You may be there for 2 hours because of requirements by REMS, but the experience is fairly short. With psilocybin, it could be a 4 to 8 hour experience depending on the person and the dose. And you're open longer. So there's an opening to really be able to shift that new fallen snow, shift your perspective that lasts for weeks and really can make a difference in someone's life.
That is where we can pick up on the next episode if you're gracious enough to have another one of these podcasts with me. I mean, I'd really love to understand much more of the clinical side of it, much more of the person who has been suffering, whether they know it or don't know it, and the science and just all the pieces that there's a lack of education around it right now. And I think that when people like yourselves are bringing that to the forefront for people to consume in order to understand how they can help themselves or someone else is really, really important. So we'll put a pin in that, as I say. We'll come back.
Sounds great. Thanks, Greg.
Well, Kerri, this has been a really enjoyable conversation. And I always ask at the end if there's anything else that you might that you wanted to say that you didn't say. And also, your information is always attached to these podcasts so people can get a hold of you, but please mention that as well.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things about opening up to new opportunities. So when I started learning healing touch because of having this miraculous healing, right? And then core shamanism, I'd been an atheist for 20 years. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I had left a religion that was pretty oppressive behind from growing up and thought I was pretty good with just letting that all go. And, I came to find out that Jesus and Mother Mary were there to help me. And who would have thought? I was just blown away. And, just be open to the surprise. If you do go down this path of learning more about your spiritual side, learning more about bringing hope and healing to others, be open to the surprise. Again, approaching these things with curiosity goes a long ways.
Well, that is a perfect place to end this conversation. And I, again, thank you for joining me, and can't wait to do this again sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Greg.
We'll talk again. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.